I will never forget that winter afternoon on the crowded subway train. I was 9 months pregnant, my back aching, my feet swollen, the baby pressing heavy against my ribs. When a kind stranger finally offered me his seat, I felt a moment of blessed relief wash over me. But that safety never lasted long around my mother-in-law, Margaret Reed. Her eyes swept over me with impatience before she whispered to my husband, Daniel, "My arthritis is killing me today. I need that seat." I clutched my belly, silently praying he would refuse. Instead, Daniel grabbed my arm, tugging me up in front of a car full of passengers. 9 months pregnant, and he yanked me out of the chair so his mother could sit in my place. A ripple of disgust spread through the car. People shook their heads. A teenage girl whispered, "That's so messed up." My cheeks burned with humiliation. My body trembled. But Margaret sighed dramatically as she lowered herself onto the seat, saying loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Thank you, son. At my age, I deserve priority." The humiliation cut deeper than any labor pain I'd ever imagined. My knees wobbled, my heart pounded, and I held the metal pole with one hand, the life inside me with the other. And then silence fell. A woman older than Margaret, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, her coat plain but dignified, rose from across the aisle. She looked at me with piercing blue eyes, reached for my hand, and said only 3 words, "God sees everything." Daniel's face turned pale instantly. He couldn't even look at me. That was the moment my world shifted. But to understand why, you need to know how I ended up there in the first place. My name is Emily Walker, and until that day on the subway, I thought I had built a good life for myself. At 30, I was working as an elementary school teacher in a suburb just outside of Boston, living in a modest apartment that I had decorated with flea market finds and cherished family photos. I met Daniel Reed at a mutual friend's wedding 3 years ago. He was handsome in that understated way, dark hair that fell just right, kind eyes, and a smile that lit up his whole face. A software developer with a promising career, he seemed like the steady, reliable type I'd always hoped to find. "You look lost," he'd said, finding me alone on the venue's balcony, escaping the crowd. I laughed. "Just taking a breather. Large groups drain me." "Me too," he admitted, leaning against the railing. "I'd rather have one good conversation than 20 shallow ones." That night, we talked until the wedding ended, about books, our childhoods, dreams we hadn't shared with anyone else. When he asked for my number, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Our courtship was a whirlwind of coffee dates, weekend hikes, and long conversations that left me feeling seen in a way I never had before. 6 months in, he proposed during a sunset picnic at the harbor, and I said yes without hesitation. My father, James Walker, a quiet but perceptive man who'd raised me alone after my mother died when I was 12, seemed cautiously optimistic about Daniel. "He seems like a good man, Emmy," Dad said after meeting him. "Just make sure you're not rushing into anything." But I was certain. Daniel represented everything I'd ever wanted: stability, kindness, a partner who understood my introversion and didn't try to change me. The first red flag appeared at our engagement dinner. Daniel's mother, Margaret, a widow of 10 years, arrived wearing a dress more appropriate for the mother of the bride at the actual wedding. She kissed Daniel on both cheeks before turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, this is the teacher," she said, her voice honey-sweet, but laced with something sharp. "Daniel tells me you work with small children. How nurturing of you." Throughout dinner, she reminisced about Daniel's ex-girlfriend, Allison, such ambition, working at that law firm, and questioned me about everything from my salary to my family background. "Your father raised you alone, how unusual. And no siblings." She clicked her tongue. "Daniel always wanted a big family, didn't you, dear?" Daniel just smiled uncomfortably. "Mom, please." I should have seen it then. How he never directly contradicted her, how he sought her approval with his eyes, how he changed the subject, rather than defend me. After we married in a small ceremony, which Margaret criticized as practically eloping, we moved into a duplex closer to the suburbs. Daniel promised it was temporary, just until we saved for a down payment on our own home. I threw myself into making it ours, painting the walls, planting window boxes, creating the nest I'd always dreamed of. When I discovered I was pregnant 6 months after our wedding, Daniel lifted me off the ground in a hug that made me believe everything would be perfect. We spent that night talking about names, planning the nursery, dreaming of who our child might become. "I want to be the kind of father mine never was," Daniel whispered, his hand on my still flat stomach. "Present, involved, someone our kid can count on." For a few precious weeks I floated on that joy. Then came the complications. At 16 weeks my doctor detected elevated blood pressure. By 20 weeks I was experiencing dizzy spells that sometimes left me unable to stand. My principal suggested I take an early maternity leave, and reluctantly I agreed. That's when Margaret inserted herself into our lives. "You need someone experienced," she told Daniel when he called to tell her about my condition. "I'm moving in to help." I tried to protest. Our duplex barely had enough room for us and a baby, let alone a third adult. But Daniel looked at me with pleading eyes. "It's just until the baby comes." "She means well, Em, and she knows about these things." Margaret arrived with 4 suitcases and immediately rearranged our kitchen. "You had everything in the wrong place," she informed me. "No wonder you're struggling." Those first weeks were a slow erosion of my authority in my own home. Margaret questioned my doctor's advice, suggesting old remedies instead of my prescribed medication. She criticized my diet, my rest schedule, even how I sat on the couch. "You're coddling yourself," she'd say, watching me struggle to catch my breath after climbing the stairs. When I was pregnant with Daniel, I worked full shifts at the department store until the day he was born. Daniel never contradicted her. At night, when I whispered my concerns, he'd squeeze my hand and say, "She's trying to help, Em, and it's only temporary." But as my body grew more unwieldy and my strength diminished, Margaret's control expanded. She took over, cooking, claiming my meals were lacking nutrition. She answered our phone, scheduled our appointments, and even began speaking for me at doctor visits. "She's just being dramatic about the pain," she told my obstetrician while I sat there fighting tears. "Women today expect everything to be easy." I became a ghost in my own life, shrinking into silence as the baby grew within me. Daniel spent longer hours at work, avoiding the tension at home. When he was there, he treated his mother's word as gospel and my concerns as hormonal overreactions. By my 3rd trimester, I barely recognized myself or my marriage. The confident teacher who had once commanded a classroom of 30 children now flinched at the sound of Margaret's footsteps. The loving husband who had promised to protect our family now avoided my gaze when his mother spoke over me. And then came that fateful subway ride, the moment that would change everything. "We should take the subway downtown," Margaret announced that December morning. "I need to pick up Daniel's Christmas gift from Macy's." I was exhausted, having barely slept through the night. My due date was just 10 days away, and every part of my body ached. With the weight of impending motherhood, the thought of navigating Boston's crowded transit system made me want to curl up and cry. "Maybe we could go another day," I suggested timidly. "Or Daniel could drive us after work." Margaret's laugh was sharp. "In this traffic? Besides, the sale ends today. Daniel's meeting us there after work. It'll be fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time without all this fussing." 2 hours later, we were pushing through the downtown crowds, Margaret striding ahead while I waddled behind, one hand supporting my lower back. By the time we finished at Macy's, my feet had swollen so badly I could barely fit them back into my boots. "Margaret, I need to sit down," I finally said, leaning against a display case. She glanced at her watch. "We're meeting Daniel at the station in 10 minutes. You can rest on the subway." The station was packed with evening commuters. I stood on the platform, swaying slightly, focusing on my breathing as Margaret complained about the prices at Macy's. When the train arrived, it was standing room only. I gripped the nearest pole, closing my eyes against a wave of dizziness. 3 stops later, several seats opened up as passengers exited. A young man in a business suit noticed me and immediately stood. "Ma'am, please take my seat," he said, gesturing to the now empty spot. "Thank you," I whispered, lowering myself gratefully into the seat. The relief was immediate, the pressure on my back easing, the strain on my ankles subsiding. I closed my eyes for a moment, cradling my belly. That's when I felt Margaret's sharp tap on my shoulder. "Emily," she hissed, "I've been standing all day shopping. My arthritis is flaring up terribly." I looked up at her, then at the other empty seats further down the car. "There are seats over there, Margaret." Her face hardened. "Those are too far from the exit. This stop is better." Before I could respond, the train lurched into the next station, and Daniel boarded, looking tired from his workday. Margaret immediately waved him over. "Daniel, tell your wife to give me her seat. My knees are killing me." His eyes darted between us, that familiar look of conflict crossing his face. Then, without a word, he reached down and gripped my elbow. Come on, let Mom sit down." "Daniel, I began, but he was already pulling me up, his grip uncomfortably tight. The motion was so abrupt that I stumbled slightly, my free hand flying to my belly for protection. The reaction from the other passengers was immediate. A woman across the aisle gasped. The businessman who had given me his seat shook his head in disgust. Two teenage girls stopped their conversation to stare. As Margaret sank into the seat with a satisfied sigh, she looked up at the surrounding faces and added, "Thank you, son. At my age, I deserve priority." My face burned with humiliation. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I stood there, holding the pole with white knuckles, feeling my baby shift uncomfortably inside me, as if she too felt the injustice of the moment. That's when it happened. The intervention that would echo in my mind for months to come. The elderly woman sitting across from us stood up slowly. She must have been in her 70s, with carefully pinned silver hair and a weathered face that spoke of wisdom earned through decades of life. Her clothes were simple but immaculate. A navy wool coat, sensible shoes, a hand-knitted scarf. She moved with deliberate care until she stood directly in front of us. Her eyes, clear, blue and piercing, met mine first, filled with such compassion that my breath caught. Then, with quiet dignity, she reached out and took my hand in her cool, dry palm. "God sees everything," she said, her voice soft but carrying in the suddenly silent car. 3 simple words, but they hit with the force of thunder. Daniel's face drained of color. Margaret's mouth opened and closed without sound. And something inside me, something that had been bending for months, finally broke free. The woman didn't wait for a response. She simply guided me to her vacated seat, helped me sit down, and stood beside me, one hand resting lightly on my shoulder. No one in the car spoke. The only sounds were the rumble of the tracks and my own shaky breathing. When we reached the next stop, Daniel mumbled something about getting off, though it wasn't our destination. Margaret protested, but he practically pulled her from the train, unable to meet anyone's eyes. As the doors closed behind them, I remained seated, the stranger's hand still on my shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded once. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "we need someone else to speak the truth before we can hear it. Ourselves." I rode to the end of the line that night, the kind woman, Agnes, she later told me, sitting beside me. We talked little, but her presence was a balm to my wounded spirit. When I finally called a rideshare to take me home, she wrote her phone number on a scrap of paper. "When you're ready," was all she said. I arrived home to find Daniel and Margaret in heated discussion. They fell silent. When I entered, Margaret's face tight with indignation, Daniel's hollow with shame. "Emily," he started, but I walked past them both straight to our bedroom. I locked the door behind me, something I'd never done before in our marriage. That night, as I lay in bed alone, my hand resting on my restless baby, I made a decision. The woman on the train had given me more than just her seat. She had given me back my voice. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would speak. I woke before dawn, the quiet house a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. For the first time in months, I felt something beyond fear and exhaustion. I felt clarity. The memory of Agnes's voice echoed in my mind. God sees everything. 3 words that somehow contained both comfort and warning. Moving carefully. To avoid waking Daniel, who had eventually come to bed and fallen into a restless sleep on the far edge of our mattress, I gathered what I needed: my phone, journal, and the emergency bag I'd packed for the hospital. Then I slipped into the nursery we'd prepared, a small room painted soft yellow with clouds drifting across the ceiling. I sat in the rocking chair, watching the darkness outside gradually yield to grey morning light. By the time I heard movement in the kitchen, Margaret's familiar heavy footsteps, the clatter of the coffee maker, I had made my decision. I wouldn't leave, not yet, but I wouldn't be silent anymore either. When I entered the kitchen, Margaret was at the stove, spatula in hand. She glanced at me, then quickly away. "You're up early," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Daniel's in the shower. I'm making his favorite breakfast before work." I stood in the doorway, one hand supporting my belly. "We need to talk about yesterday." Margaret's shoulders stiffened. There's nothing to discuss. You were tired, I was tired, these things happen. No, I said, my voice steady. These things don't just happen. You deliberately humiliated me in public, and Daniel helped you do it. She turned to face me, her expression hardening. You're being dramatic. I'm older than you. I was in pain, and I'm 9 months pregnant, I finished for her, carrying your grandchild. But that didn't matter to either of you. The bathroom door opened down the hall, and Daniel emerged, dressed for work. He stopped short when he saw us facing off in the kitchen, tension thick in the air between us. What's going on? He asked, though his averted eyes suggested he knew exactly what was happening. I turned to him. I'm telling your mother that what happened yesterday was unacceptable. Both of you treated me like I was nothing. Daniel's gaze darted between us. Come on. It was just a misunderstanding. Let's not... A misunderstanding? My voice rose slightly. You pulled me out of a seat when I could barely stand. You let your mother speak to me like I was a child. You walked away and left me on that train. Margaret scoffed. We got off at the wrong stop because you were making a scene. If anything, we're the ones who were inconvenienced. The absurdity of her statement might have made me laugh if it weren't so painful. Instead, I looked directly at Daniel. Is that how you see it? Was I inconveniencing you by existing? He ran a hand through his damp hair, his discomfort palpable. Of course not. Look, I'm going to be late for work. Can we talk about this tonight? No, I said simply. We talk about it now. Daniel checked his watch, then sighed. Emily, I'm sorry about yesterday. I handled it badly, but Mom really was in pain, and I was trying to take care of both of you, and don't you dare make excuses, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my firmness. You weren't trying to take care of me. You haven't been taking care of me for months. Margaret slammed the spatula down. That's enough. Daniel has been nothing but patient with your constant complaints and neediness. Pregnancy isn't an illness, Emily. In my day, this isn't your day, I cut in. This is my pregnancy, my body, my life that you've been controlling since you moved in, and Daniel has let you. Daniel's face flushed. That's not fair. Mom's been helping us. Helping, I echoed. Is that what you call it when she contradicts my doctor? When she reorganizes our home without asking? When she speaks for me at appointments like I'm not even there? A heavy silence fell. Daniel looked trapped, his gaze bouncing between his mother's indignant face and my resolute one. Finally, he grabbed his laptop bag. I have to go to work. We'll figure this out tonight. As he moved toward the door, I felt something shift inside me, not the baby, but a wall crumbling. If you walk out that door right now, I said quietly, you're making a choice, Daniel, and I'll be making one too. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment I thought he might turn back, might finally choose me. Then his shoulders slumped. I can't be late again. My boss is already on my case. He glanced at me, his expression pleading. Just a few hours, Em, then we'll talk. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. Margaret turned back to the stove, scraping the now burning eggs. Well, that was unnecessary, she muttered. You've upset him before an important meeting. I stood there, feeling strangely calm. I'm going to my father's today, I said. I need some space to think. Margaret whirled around. Don't be ridiculous. You can't travel in your condition. Besides, Daniel needs... I don't care what Daniel needs right now, I said, the words strange and liberating on my tongue. For once I'm thinking about what I need, what my baby needs. I returned to our bedroom and called my father, explaining in brief, measured terms what had happened. Dad, who lived an hour away in a small house near the coast, didn't hesitate. I'm coming to get you, Emmy. Pack whatever you need. While I waited, I moved methodically around the house, gathering essentials. Prenatal vitamins, comfortable clothes, the stuffed bear my mother had given me as a child that I'd saved for my own baby. Margaret hovered, alternating between cold silence and attempts to dissuade me. You're overreacting, she insisted, as I folded a nightgown. Daniel will be devastated if you're not here when he gets home. I didn't respond. Words felt unnecessary now that I had found my resolve. When my father's truck pulled into the driveway, his familiar figure, tall, slightly stooped, with the same brown eyes I saw in the mirror, brought tears to my eyes for the first time that day. He took one look at me and wrapped me in a hug that felt like coming home. I've got you, sweetheart, he murmured into my hair. I've always got you. Margaret followed us onto the porch, her face tight with anger. James, Talk some sense into your daughter. She's making a terrible mistake." My father, usually so careful with his words, turned to her with quiet firmness. The only mistake here was not coming to get her sooner. In the truck, as we pulled away from the house that had become my prison, Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. "Your mother would be proud of you today." I let the tears come then, not tears of sadness or fear, but of release. Watching the neighborhood recede through the window, I felt the baby shift inside me, as if sensing the change in our path. That night in my childhood bedroom with its faded floral wallpaper and creaking twin bed, I slept deeply for the first time in months. When morning came, I had 6 missed calls from Daniel and a text that read simply, "Please come home, we need to talk." I wrote back one line, "I am home." 3 days passed in the gentle quiet of my father's house by the sea. Daniel called repeatedly, his messages evolving from confused to contrite to desperate. Margaret sent a single text, "You're being selfish. Daniel is falling apart." My father answered the door when Daniel finally drove up on the 3rd evening. Through the window, I watched them talk on the porch, my husband gesturing frantically, my father standing like a weathered lighthouse against a storm. Eventually, Daniel left without seeing me, his shoulders hunched in defeat. "He wants you to come back," Dad reported, settling beside me on the couch. "Says he sent his mother to his aunt's house for a while." I rested my head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of woodshop and mint that had been my comfort since childhood. Too little, too late. Dad didn't push. Instead, he shared stories about my mother, how brave she'd been during her own difficult pregnancy, how fiercely she'd protected me, how she'd taught him that love should lift you up, never diminish you. "Your mother knew her worth," he said softly. "She wouldn't have wanted less for you." That night, as a winter storm lashed against the windows, I felt the first contraction ripple across my abdomen. By midnight, they were coming regularly, sharp waves that took my breath away. "Time to go," Dad said, already grabbing the hospital bag I'd repacked. The drive to the nearest hospital was tense, my contractions intensifying as sleet pelted the windshield. At the emergency entrance, nurses quickly whisked me into a labor room, confirming what I already knew. My baby was coming, weeks earlier than expected, but determined to make her entrance. "Do you want me to call Daniel?" Dad asked as they hooked me up to monitors. Through gritted teeth, I nodded. Whatever had happened between us, this was still his child. Daniel arrived an hour later, his hair wild from the wind, his face pale with worry. He stood awkwardly at the door until I gestured him in. "I came as fast as I could," he said, approaching the bed cautiously. "How are you doing?" Before I could answer, another contraction seized me stronger than before. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, squeezing it until the pain subsided. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not forgiveness exactly, but a temporary truce in the face of something larger than our broken marriage. The next few hours blurred into a cycle of pain, breathing, and the steady encouragement of the medical team. Daniel stayed by my side, wiping my forehead, offering ice chips, murmuring support that sounded genuine for the first time in months. Just before dawn, as the storm outside began to quiet, my daughter made her entrance with a powerful cry that filled the room. The doctor placed her on my chest, her tiny body warm and impossibly perfect against my skin. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She looks like you." I gazed at our daughter, her rosebud mouth, the dark sweep of eyelashes, the determined set of her chin. "Hello, Lily," I said, the name we'd chosen months ago suddenly feeling right. "Welcome to the world." In the quiet hour that followed, as nurses tended to us both and dawn broke outside the window, Daniel sat beside the bed, watching us with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "I messed up, Em," he said finally. "I let Mom take over everything. I didn't protect you when I should have. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want to try to make it right." I looked at him over our daughter's head, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, not the idealized husband I'd wanted him to be, but the flawed man he actually was. "I don't know what forgiveness looks like right now, Daniel. I just know that I deserve better than what you've given me." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You do, you both do." The moment was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway, raised voices, the sound of hurried footsteps. Then the door burst open, and Margaret swept in, her face a mask of indignation. "Why wasn't I called?" she demanded, glaring at Daniel. My own grandchild is born, and I have to find out when your aunt calls to congratulate me? Daniel stood, positioning himself between his mother and my bed. Mom, this isn't the time. Emily just had a baby. Margaret tried to push past him. I have every right to be here. I'm family. So am I, came my father's steady voice from the doorway. He entered carrying a tray of coffee cups, his expression calm but resolute. And right now Emily needs rest, not stress. Margaret's face flushed with anger. You've turned them both against me. Well, I won't stand for it. Daniel, tell your father-in-law that I have every right to see my grandchild. To my surprise, Daniel didn't waver. Not now, Mom. Emily and Lily need quiet. You can visit tomorrow, during regular hours, if Emily feels up to it. Lily, Margaret echoed, her voice rising. You were supposed to name her after me. We discussed this. Daniel's expression hardened. No, you discussed it. We chose Lily months ago. As Margaret's protests grew louder, a nurse appeared at the door. Is everything all right? We need to keep this environment calm for mother and baby. My mother was just leaving, Daniel said firmly. Margaret looked from Daniel to me to the tiny bundle in my arms. For a moment, something like hurt flashed across her face, quickly replaced by cold anger. Fine, but this isn't over. After she stormed out, an uncomfortable silence fell. Daniel looked exhausted, the weight of his divided loyalties visible in the slump of his shoulders. I should go talk to her, he said finally. I nodded, not surprised, but still disappointed. Some patterns were hard to break. Go ahead. He hesitated at the door. I'll be back soon, I promise. But he didn't return that day, or the next. My father stayed with me, helping with Lily, fielding calls from concerned friends, creating a buffer between us and the outside world. When the hospital discharged us, it was Dad who drove us back to his coastal home, who had prepared the spare room with a borrowed crib, who stood guard as we settled into our new reality. Daniel texted that he was dealing with a situation with his mother, that he needed a few days, that he was sorry. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on Lily, her perfect fingers, her midnight feedings, the miracle of her existence. In the quiet moments between her needs, as I rocked her by the window overlooking the winter sea, I felt something unfamiliar taking root inside me. Not anger, not heartbreak, but strength. We're going to be okay, I whispered to my daughter as she slept against my heart. No matter what happens next, we're going to be okay. A week after Lily's birth, Daniel finally appeared at my father's doorstep. He stood there in the grey January afternoon, snowflakes catching in his hair, holding a stuffed elephant and wearing an expression that mingled hope and fear. Can I come in? He asked, his voice uncertain. I'd like to see Lily and you. Dad looked to me for guidance, ready to send Daniel away if I gave the slightest indication. But I nodded. It's fine, Dad. We should talk. In the living room, with Lily asleep in her bassinet between us like a tiny neutral territory, Daniel spoke first. I'm sorry I wasn't there, he said, his eyes fixed on our daughter's sleeping face. After you were discharged, I should have been with you both. I waited, giving him space to continue. He'd had a week to prepare this speech. I wanted to hear all of it. My mother, he began, then stopped, shaking his head. No, I can't blame her. It was me. I've always found it easier to give her what she wants than to stand up to her. After my dad left us, I became her protector, her confidant. It was just the two of us for so long. That doesn't excuse how she treated me, I said quietly, or how you allowed it. Daniel nodded, his expression pained. I know. There's no excuse. When she moved in with us, I told myself she was helping, that her experience would be good for us, but I knew Emily. I knew she was controlling everything, undermining you. I didn't want to choose. But you did choose, I pointed out. Every time you stayed silent, every time you deferred to her, you were choosing her over me, over us. He flinched, as if I'd struck him. You're right. And on the subway that day, his voice broke. I'll never forget the look on your face when I pulled you up from that seat, or what that woman said. The memory of Agnes's voice floated between us. God sees everything. Where is Margaret now? I asked, not entirely sure I wanted to know. Daniel sighed. At my aunt's still. She wants to come see the baby, but I told her that's not her decision to make. He hesitated, then added, I've been looking at apartments, actually. I think I need to establish some boundaries with her. For the first time in my life. I studied his face. searching for sincerity. That's a start. But Daniel, this isn't just about your mother anymore, it's about us, about trust that's been broken. Lily stirred in her sleep, her tiny fingers curling and uncurling. Daniel watched her with such longing that despite everything I felt a twinge of compassion. "Would you like to hold her?" I offered. Relief flooded his features. "Can I?" I nodded, and he carefully lifted Lily from her bassinet, cradling her with a gentleness that reminded me of our early days together, when tenderness had come so naturally to him. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I've missed so much already." "A week," I corrected him. "You've missed a week, Daniel, but you're in danger of missing much more if things don't change." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "I want to change, Emily. I want to be the husband and father you both deserve. Please, just tell me how to fix this." I considered his plea, weighing it against the months of neglect and betrayal. "I don't think it's that simple. I need time and space. I need to know that you're making these changes for yourself, not just to win me back." "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm saying I'm not coming home right now. Dad has offered to let us stay as long as we need, and I'm going to take him up on it." I took a deep breath. "I think we should consider a trial separation, Daniel. Give us both time to figure out what we really want." He looked stricken but didn't argue. "Can I still see Lily?" "Of course, she's your daughter. But the visits happen here or in neutral territory, not at our house, not with your mother present." Daniel nodded slowly. "And us? Is there still hope for us?" I wished I had a clear answer, but the truth was more complicated. "I don't know. I care about you, Daniel. Part of me still loves the man I thought you were, but I need to see real change, not just promises." We settled on a visitation schedule, 3 evenings a week and Sunday afternoons. Daniel would continue paying our mortgage and bills, while I focused on recovering and caring for Lily. Neither of us mentioned divorce, leaving that final step unspoken, but looming in the background of our arrangement. As he prepared to leave, Daniel paused at the door. "That woman on the subway," he said hesitantly. "Do you ever think about her? Agnes?" I smiled faintly. "All the time. She saw right through us, didn't she?" "Through me." I nodded. "She saw the truth." After he left, I found my father in the kitchen, pretending not to have been listening. "You okay, Emmy?" he asked, busying himself with washing dishes that were already clean. "I think so," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. For the first time in a long time, I think I might actually be okay. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm. Daniel visited faithfully, always on time, always bringing something small for Lily. A book, a soft toy, once a tiny bracelet with her birthstone. He never pushed for reconciliation, though I sometimes caught him looking at me with longing when he thought I wouldn't notice. Margaret made her presence known. Through absence. She sent gifts for Lily that arrived by mail, expensive, impractical items that I quietly donated. She called Daniel during his visits, emergencies that mysteriously resolved themselves when he held firm about not leaving early. "She's testing you," I observed after one such call, as he silenced his ringing phone for the 3rd time. "I know," he sighed. "She's not used to hearing. No, from me, it's uncomfortable." "Growth usually is," I replied. February melted into March. Lily thrived, her personality emerging in small, delightful ways. Her serious expression when encountering something new, her radiant smile when she recognized a familiar face, her determined wriggle when she wanted to be held. I began to find my footing as a mother, gaining confidence with each passing day. The postpartum fog lifted, revealing a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I started thinking about the future, returning to teaching eventually, perhaps finding a place of our own near Dad's house, building a life centered on Lily's needs and my own rediscovered sense of self. One Sunday afternoon in early spring, as Daniel played with Lily on a blanket in the backyard, I found myself watching them with unexpected warmth. He had changed in subtle but meaningful ways, standing straighter, speaking more directly, making decisions without constantly checking his phone for his mother's approval. "I looked at an apartment yesterday," he mentioned casually, as he handed Lily back to me at the end of his visit. "It's small but nice, close to work." "That's good," I said, genuinely meaning it. "It sounds like a positive step." He nodded, hesitating before adding, "I've also started seeing someone, a therapist, I mean, to talk about everything. My relationship with my mother, Why I let things get so bad between us. Something loosened in my chest at his words. I'm glad, Daniel, that's really good to hear. As spring bloomed around us, I found myself thinking more often of Agnes, the woman from the subway. Her phone number was still in my wallet, written on that small scrap of paper. One afternoon while Lily napped, I finally gathered the courage to call. To my surprise, she remembered me immediately. "The young mother from the train," she said, her voice warm through the phone. "I've been wondering how you were doing." We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived pushing Lily's stroller, Agnes was already there, elegant in a simple blue dress, her silver hair arranged in the same neat bun. "She's beautiful," Agnes said, smiling at Lily. "She has your eyes." Over tea and scones, I told her everything. The separation, Daniel's efforts to change, my own journey toward healing. She listened with the same quiet intensity she had shown on the train, her eyes never leaving my face. "You know," she said when I finished, "I almost didn't speak up that day. I've seen so many wrongs in my lifetime, and often stayed silent, telling myself it wasn't my place. But something about you, perhaps because you reminded me of my daughter at that age, I couldn't stay quiet. You changed everything," I told her. Those 3 words gave me permission to trust what I already knew. Agnes reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "No, dear. I simply reminded you of what you already knew in your heart. The strength was always yours." We parted with a promise to meet again soon. As I walked back to my car, pushing Lily's stroller through streets dappled with spring sunshine, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't, but because I was finally walking my own path, guided by my own truth. That evening, when Daniel arrived to say goodnight to Lily, something felt different between us. Not a rekindling of what was lost, but perhaps the fragile beginning of something new, something built on honesty rather than expectation, on respect rather than obligation. "I've been thinking," he said as he prepared to leave, "would you consider maybe having dinner sometime? Just the 2 of us? Not to pressure you about anything, just to talk. As friends, if nothing else." I considered his request, searching for my honest response. "Maybe," I said finally. "Let me think about it." He nodded, accepting my answer without pushing. As he walked to his car, I noticed how the evening light caught on his hair, how his shoulders no longer carried the weight of divided loyalties. He was changing, slowly but genuinely. Whether it would be enough to rebuild what we had lost, I didn't yet know. But for the first time I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of a future where we might both be whole, together or apart. April arrived with gentle rains and tentative warmth. Lily grew more alert each day, her curious eyes following me around the room, her small hands reaching for anything within grasp. I treasured these quiet months in my father's home, this cocoon where we could both grow stronger. Dad had become Lily's devoted grandfather, reading to her from his old workshop manuals as if they were bedtime stories, fashioning tiny wooden toys that she was still too young to appreciate, but would treasure someday. "Your mother would have adored her," he told me one evening as we watched Lily sleep. "She has that same determined look Mary had, like she's already planning to take on the world." I was slowly rebuilding my life piece by piece. I'd started tutoring a few students online during Lily's naps, keeping my teaching skills sharp while earning a modest income. I joined a support group for new mothers at the local library, finding solidarity in shared experiences of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Daniel remained a constant, reliable presence in Lily's life. Our interactions had evolved from tense to cautiously friendly. We could now discuss Lily's development or practical matters without the weight of unspoken accusations between us. I had even, after much consideration, agreed to the dinner he'd suggested. We met at a small restaurant by the harbour, both dressed with the awkward formality of a first date rather than a meeting between estranged spouses. "You look beautiful," he said when I arrived, his voice sincere. "Thank you," I replied, suddenly shy. "You look good too." The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, covering safe topics at first: Lily's latest milestones, my tutoring work, his new apartment. As the evening progressed, we ventured into deeper waters. "I've been thinking a lot about what went wrong between us," Daniel said as we shared dessert. "Not just my mother's involvement, but before that, I think I was afraid of failing you, of not being enough. So I let my mother take control because she seemed so confident, so certain about everything. I considered his words. I understand that. But marriage is about facing those fears together, not handing the reins to someone else. I know that now, he said quietly. Too late, maybe, but I know it. By the time he walked me to my car, something had shifted between us. Not reconciliation, exactly, but a tentative bridge across the chasm that had separated us. Thank you for tonight, he said, keeping a respectful distance. It was nice, I admitted. Maybe we could do it again sometime. His smile was hopeful, but restrained. I'd like that. 3 days later, the delicate peace we'd established was shattered by an unexpected development. I was feeding Lily in the sunroom when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Is this Emily Walker? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes, who's calling? This is Patricia Reed, Daniel's aunt. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, but I thought you should know. Margaret had a fall yesterday. She's in the hospital. My stomach tightened. Despite everything, I couldn't wish harm on Daniel's mother. Is she all right? Broken hip. She'll recover, but she's facing surgery and a long rehabilitation. Patricia paused. The thing is, she's asking for you. For me? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. I know. I was surprised too, but she's quite insistent. Daniel is with her now, but he doesn't know I'm calling you. I just thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity. After hanging up, I paced the room debating what to do. I had every right to ignore Margaret's request after how she'd treated me, but something, curiosity perhaps, or the faint hope of resolution, made me reach for my car keys. Dad, can you watch Lily for a couple of hours? There's something I need to do. The hospital was a 30-minute drive, each mile giving me time to reconsider my decision. By the time I reached Margaret's room, my resolve was wavering. I paused outside the door, hearing Daniel's voice within, soft and concerned. Taking a deep breath, I knocked and entered. The sight of Margaret in a hospital bed, small, pale, vulnerable, was jarring. Daniel stood beside her, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to cautious hope when he saw me. Emily? What are you doing here? Patricia called me, I explained, moving hesitantly into the room. She said Margaret was asking for me. Margaret's eyes, clouded with pain medication but still sharp, fixed on my face. You came, she said, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. I did, I replied simply. Daniel looked between us uncertainly. I'll give you two some privacy. No, Margaret said, reaching for his hand. Stay, please. For a moment, the three of us remained in awkward tableau. Margaret in the bed, Daniel beside her, me standing at the foot, the weight of months of hurt and misunderstanding filling the space between us. Then Margaret did something I never expected. She began to cry. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her lined face. I've been terrible to you, Emily, absolutely terrible. I stood frozen, unable to process this sudden vulnerability from a woman who had always wielded strength like a weapon. When Patricia took me in, Margaret continued, her voice trembling, she didn't coddle me like Daniel always did. She called me out on my behavior, made me see what I'd done to your marriage to you. She looked at Daniel. To my own son. Daniel's expression was a mixture of shock and relief, as if he'd been waiting years to hear these words. I was so afraid of losing him, Margaret admitted, her gaze returning to me. After his father left, Daniel became my whole world. When he married you, I convinced myself you were taking him away from me. So I tried to claim territory, to make sure he still needed me more than he needed you. The raw honesty of her confession left me speechless. This was the woman who had methodically undermined my confidence, who had treated my pregnancy as an inconvenience, who had humiliated me in public. Yet here she was, stripped of her armor, finally speaking a truth I had never expected to hear. The subway, I said, finding my voice at last. Do you remember what that woman said? Margaret nodded, fresh tears spilling. God sees everything. I haven't been able to forget it. It was like she could see right through all my justifications to what I was really doing. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation halting and difficult but necessary. Margaret spoke of her fear of becoming irrelevant, of the loneliness that had hardened into control. I shared how her actions had made me feel invisible in my own life, how Daniel's failure to protect me had broken something essential between us. Daniel listened more than spoke, occasionally wiping away his own tears. witnessing the painful dismantling of pretenses that had shaped our shared tragedy. "I don't expect forgiveness," Margaret said finally. "I don't deserve it, but I want you both to know I'm going to do better, starting now." As I prepared to leave, she asked, tentatively, would it be possible to see Lily sometime? "When I'm recovered. On your terms, of course." I considered her request, searching for the answer that felt right. "We'll see," I said, not unkindly. "One step at a time." Daniel walked me to my car, both of us quiet, processing the unexpected turn of events. "Did you know?" I asked him. "About her epiphany?" He shook his head. "No. She's been different since staying with Aunt Pat, but nothing like this. I never thought I'd hear her admit she was wrong about anything." "People can surprise you," I said, thinking not just of Margaret but of Daniel himself, of the changes I'd witnessed in him over these past months. "Emily," he said hesitantly, "I know this doesn't fix everything. One apology doesn't erase months of hurt. But is there any chance we could try again? Really try, without the past coming between us?" The question hung in the air between us, weighted with possibility and risk. I thought of all we'd been through, of the broken trust and painful lessons, but also of the good moments. Daniel holding Lily for the first time, our surprisingly enjoyable dinner, the genuine effort he'd been making to change. "I don't know," I answered truthfully, "but I'm willing to find out." The summer brought warm breezes off the ocean and new beginnings that none of us could have predicted. Margaret's recovery progressed slowly but steadily, her physical therapy sessions becoming a metaphor for the emotional rehabilitation we were all undertaking. Her relationship with Patricia, a sister-in-law, she had previously dismissed as too opinionated, blossomed into an unexpected friendship founded on honesty and mutual respect. Daniel and I embarked on our own tentative journey of reconstruction. We started with weekly family dinners at my father's house, neutral territory where Lily could be the center of attention, and we could practice being parents together without the pressure of rekindling our romantic relationship. "You're good with her," I observed one evening as Daniel gently bathed Lily in the kitchen sink, her delighted splashes soaking his shirt. "You've really found your rhythm." He looked up, pleasure warming his face at the compliment. "It helps having such a good teacher," he replied, nodding toward me. "You make it look effortless." Dad, watching from the doorway, caught my eye and gave a small nod of approval. He'd been skeptical of Daniel's transformation at first, protective of both me and Lily. But over the weeks, I'd seen his defenses lower as Daniel consistently proved himself dependable, patient, and, most importantly, willing to stand on his own 2 feet. By July, we had graduated to occasional outings as a family, trips to the beach, where Lily experienced sand for the first time, picnics in the park, even a local strawberry festival where Daniel and I found ourselves laughing together like we hadn't in over a year. "I've missed this," he said, as we watched Lily sleeping in her stroller, strawberry juice still staining her chubby fingers. "Just being with you without all the tension and fear." I nodded, realizing I had missed it too, the easy companionship that had drawn us together in the first place, before expectations and family dynamics had complicated everything. "We're not the same people we were," I reminded him gently. "I don't think we can go back to how things were." "I don't want to go back," he said, surprising me. "I like who we're becoming better, especially who you're becoming, Emily. You're stronger now, more certain of yourself. I see it every time you make a decision without second-guessing, every time you speak your mind without apologizing." His observation touched something deep within me. He was right. I had changed. The woman who had stood trembling on that subway train, silently accepting humiliation, felt like a distant relative to the person I had become. I had found my voice, and with it, a sense of self-worth that no one could take away. In August, Margaret asked to meet Lily. After much consideration, Daniel and I agreed to a short visit at a cafe near the harbor, public, time-limited, and on neutral ground. I prepared myself for tension, for a regression to old patterns. Instead, I witnessed something unexpected: humility. Margaret arrived without pretense, dressed simply, her usual jewelry absent. When Daniel placed Lily in her arms, tears welled in her eyes. "She's perfect," she whispered, studying Lily's face with wonder. "She looks like you, Emily. She has your eyes." "And Daniel's chin," I added, surprising myself with the desire to include her in this shared joy. I'm sorry I missed these first months, Margaret said, her gaze still on Lily. I have no one to blame but myself. We spent an hour together, the conversation focusing entirely on Lily, free from the power struggles and criticism that had characterized our previous interactions. As we prepared to leave, Margaret handed me a small gift bag. It's nothing fancy, she said quickly. Just something I thought might be meaningful. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Daniel as a baby, held by a much younger Margaret, both of them laughing at the camera. I thought Lily might like to have a picture of her father when he was her age, Margaret explained. And maybe someday we could take a similar one of you and Lily, for comparison. The gesture, simple but thoughtful, acknowledged both the past and a possible future, one where Margaret had a place in our lives, but not at the expense of mine. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. I think Lily would like that. As summer transitioned to fall, I made a decision I'd been contemplating for months. It was time for Lily and me to move out of my father's house, not back to the duplex with its complicated memories, but forward to a place of our own. With Dad's help, I found a small two-bedroom apartment near the elementary school, where I'd accepted a part-time teaching position for the upcoming year. The space was modest, but filled with light, with a small balcony overlooking a community garden. Daniel helped with the move, assembling furniture, hanging curtains, making sure everything was perfect for Lily. His own apartment was just a 15-minute drive away, close enough for regular visits, but maintaining the separate space we both still needed. It suits you, he said as we stood in the newly furnished living room, Lily exploring her surroundings on a colorful playmat. It feels like you. I smiled, understanding what he meant. The apartment reflected choices I'd made independently, colors I loved, arrangements that made sense to me, small touches that spoke of my emerging identity separate from our marriage. I have something to ask you, Daniel said hesitantly. I've been thinking about it for a while. My heart quickened. What is it? Would you consider going to counseling with me? Not because I expect us to get back together right away or maybe ever, but because I think we both have things to work through and I'd like to do it together, even if we end up apart. I studied his face, earnest, vulnerable, free from the defensive tension that had once been his default expression. Yes, I said after a moment, I think that's a good idea. Our first counseling session was awkward but productive. We sat across from each other in Dr. Bennett's office, carefully navigating the terrain of our shared past. In the sessions that followed, we gradually uncovered patterns neither of us had fully recognized, how Daniel's abandonment by his father had created his desperate need to please his mother, how my early loss of my mother had made me reluctant to assert myself for fear of losing more connections. What I'm hearing, Dr. Bennett observed in our fifth session, is that both of you were acting from places of fear rather than strength. Daniel, you feared losing your mother's approval. Emily, you feared speaking up would cost you your marriage, and ironically those fears led you exactly where you didn't want to go. Outside of therapy, our relationship continued to evolve. Daniel became a regular fixture at my apartment for dinner, bath time and Lily's bedtime routine. Some evenings, after Lily was asleep, we would sit on the balcony with cups of tea talking about everything and nothing, his work, my students, books we were reading, dreams we still held. On one such evening in late October, as the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, Daniel reached across the small table and took my hand. I still love you, Emily, he said simply. I'm not saying that to pressure you, I just want you to know. I looked at our intertwined fingers, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against mine. I love you too, I admitted. But love was never our problem, was it? It was everything else. Trust, boundaries, priorities. He nodded, accepting this truth without defensiveness. And those are the things I'm working on, that we're working on together. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood settle into evening, porch lights coming on, windows glowing with warmth. In that moment, I realized something had shifted within me. The hurt and anger that had once dominated my feelings toward Daniel had receded, making room for something new to grow. Not forgiveness, exactly. Something more complex. Understanding, perhaps, or simply the recognition that people could change, including me. It's getting late, I said finally. You should probably go. Daniel stood but hesitated. Emily, would you consider going on a real date with me? Not family dinner, not therapy, just us, somewhere nice like we're starting over. I considered his request, searching myself for the honest answer. Yes, I said finally. I think I'd like that. His smile lit up his entire face. Next Friday? I'll make reservations somewhere. Special. As he left, I stood at the door watching him walk to his car, feeling an unexpected flutter of anticipation. We weren't the same people who had met at that wedding years ago. We weren't even the same people who had stood on that subway train in December. We had been broken and reformed, shaped by pain but also by growth. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing with certainty. I was facing it as a woman who had found her voice and would never again surrender it. Not for love, not for peace, not for anyone. On a crisp December morning, exactly 1 year after the incident on the subway, I stood in front of my closet, contemplating what to wear. Lily, now a vibrant 1-year-old with a personality as strong as her grip, babbled happily in her crib, seemingly aware of the day's significance. "What do you think, sweetheart?" I asked her, holding up 2 dresses. "The blue one or the green one?" She pointed decisively at the blue dress. The one Daniel had always said brought out the color of my eyes. "Blue it is," I agreed, setting it aside as I lifted her from the crib. "You have good taste, just like your mama." The past year had unfolded in ways I never could have predicted that winter day when a stranger's 3 words had changed everything. Daniel and I had progressed from cautious co-parents to friends to something more complex, a relationship built not on the shaky foundation of our first attempt, but on hard-earned respect and genuine understanding. Our weekly date nights had become a cherished ritual, a space where we could be simply Emily and Daniel, rather than Lily's parents or 2 people working through therapy. We'd explored new restaurants, attended concerts at the harbour, even tried a pottery class where we'd both created laughably misshapen bowls that now held fruit on my kitchen counter. Margaret, too, had maintained her transformation. After her recovery, she'd moved into a senior living community near Patricia, giving Daniel and me the space we needed while still seeing Lily for regular brief visits that gradually extended as trust rebuilt. She never again attempted to control our decisions or undermine my parenting, though I sometimes caught a flash of her old self in moments of stress, immediately followed by a visible effort to check herself. "Old habits are hard to break," she'd admitted during a surprisingly candid conversation. "But I'm trying, Emily. Every day I'm trying." My relationship with Agnes, the silver-haired woman from the train, had deepened into an unexpected friendship. Her wisdom, earned through 87 years of observing human nature, had become a touchstone in my life. We met monthly for tea, where she shared stories of her own marriage, 62 years to a man she described as stubborn as a mule but worth the trouble. "Marriage isn't about finding someone perfect," she told me once. "It's about finding someone worth working through the imperfections with." Now, as I dressed Lily in her special outfit for the day, a tiny navy dress with white collar that matched my own blue ensemble, I reflected on that wisdom. Daniel wasn't perfect, neither was I, but the work we'd done separately and together had transformed us both. The doorbell rang precisely at 10 o'clock. Daniel stood on the threshold, handsome in a charcoal suit, holding a small bouquet of daisies. My favorite, not because they were exotic or expensive, but because of their simple, unpretentious beauty. "For you," he said, handing them to me. "Happy anniversary." I raised an eyebrow. "Anniversary of what exactly?" "Our separation." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "I prefer to think of it as the anniversary of our wake-up call, the day we started becoming who we were meant to be." The sentiment was so unexpected, so perfectly aligned with my own thoughts, that I felt tears prick at my eyes. "That's a beautiful way to look at it." We buckled Lily into her car seat and set off toward the city. Daniel drove while I gazed out the window, watching the familiar landscape transition from coastal suburb to urban sprawl. We had come a long way from that fraught subway ride, both literally and figuratively. "Are you nervous about seeing her again?" Daniel asked, glancing at me as we approached the city center. I considered the question. "A little, but mostly I'm grateful for the chance to thank her properly." Agnes had called the previous week with unexpected news. She was moving to Florida to live with her daughter. Before leaving, she wanted to see us one last time. We'd arranged to meet at a small cafe near the subway station, where our paths had first crossed. She was waiting when we arrived, elegant as ever in a pale blue suit, her silver hair arranged in its customary bun. Her face lit up at the sight of Lily, who reached for her with immediate recognition. "Look how she's grown," Agnes marveled, accepting Lily onto her lap. "A proper little person now." Over lunch, we shared updates from our lives: my return to teaching, Daniel's promotion, our ongoing journey of rebuilding trust. Agnes listened attentively, occasionally offering a perspective that gently shifted our thinking, as she had always done. "Before I leave," she said as our meal concluded, "there's something I'd like to share with you both." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. "This isn't a gift exactly, more of a challenge." Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper bearing a quote written in elegant script. "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters, compared to what lies within us." Ralph Waldo Emerson, Agnes explained. "Words that have guided me through my own difficulties. I thought they might speak to you as well." As we prepared to part, knowing it might be for the last time, Agnes took my hands in hers. "You found your voice," she said softly. "Keep using it." Then, turning to Daniel, she added, "And you found your backbone. Don't lose it again." We watched her walk away, her slight figure straight and dignified despite her years. I felt a pang of loss, but also profound gratitude for the role she had played in our story. "What next?" Daniel asked as we returned to the car. "We have the whole afternoon before we need to drop Lily at your dad's." I hesitated, then suggested something that had been on my mind for weeks. Would it be okay if we visited the subway station? The exact spot where it happened? Daniel looked surprised but nodded. "If that's what you want to do, of course." 20 minutes later, we stood on the same platform where our lives had changed course. Lily perched on Daniel's hip, fascinated by the trains rumbling past. The station was busy with Saturday travelers, none paying any particular attention to the young family standing quietly amidst the flow of humanity. "It's strange," I said, watching a train arrive and depart. "It feels both significant and ordinary at the same time." Daniel nodded. "That's the thing about life-changing moments. They happen in ordinary places, on subway trains, in hospital rooms, over dinner tables." As we stood there, I found myself searching the faces of passing strangers, wondering if any of them remembered that day. The pregnant woman pulled from her seat, the elderly lady who had spoken up, the collective moment of witness that had shifted something fundamental in my universe. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about visibility," I replied, "about how I felt invisible that day. But Agnes saw me, really saw me, and somehow that made me able to see myself." He shifted Lily to his other arm, his free hand finding mine. "I see you now, Emily. I'm sorry it took me so long." We remained there for a few minutes more, not speaking, simply existing together in the place where our old life had ended and our new one had begun. Then, by mutual agreement, we turned away from the platform and headed back toward the stairs. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Daniel said as we emerged into the winter sunlight. "Something I've been thinking about for a while." My heart quickened at the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" He guided us to a small park across from the station, finding an empty bench where we could sit. Lily, growing restless, wiggled down to explore a nearby patch of winter-dormant flowers. "The past year has been transformative," Daniel began, his eyes following our daughter's explorations. "We've both changed in ways I never imagined possible. I'm proud of who I've become. But more than that, I'm in awe of who you are, who you've always been but couldn't fully be because of me, because of my mother, because of how we undermined you." I started to speak, but he gently placed his hand over mine. "Please let me finish. This is important." He took a deep breath. "I know our original marriage was built on shaky ground. We rushed in without really understanding what we were promising each other. But this past year, rebuilding, reconnecting, rediscovering each other, it feels like we've been doing the real work that should have come first." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small worn velvet box. My breath caught as he opened it, revealing not a diamond ring, but a simple band of twisted silver strands. "This isn't a proposal to go back to what we were," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "It's an invitation to something new, a marriage between equals, between two people who have seen the worst of each other and chosen to stay anyway." Tears blurred my vision as I looked at the ring, nothing like the traditional diamond he had given me the first time, but somehow more precious for its uniqueness. The silver strands represent our separate journeys, he explained, coming together by choice, not obligation, supporting each other without losing our individual strength. I stared at the ring, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. We had come so far, worked through so much, yet caution still whispered in my ear. "What about your mother?" I asked. "What happens when she needs you? When she tries to come between us again?" Daniel's expression remained steady. "I love my mother, and I always will, but I've learned where the boundaries need to be. She knows now that she isn't the center of my world. You and Lily are. And surprisingly, she's accepted that. I think in her way she's proud of me for finally standing up for myself, even if it was against her." As if sensing the significance of the moment, Lily toddled back to us, pulling herself up on my knees. I lifted her onto my lap, drawing strength from her solid warmth. "I don't need an answer today," Daniel said gently. "Take all the time you need." I looked from him to Lily to the ring, thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain and growth, the breaking and rebuilding, the woman I had become through it all. Slowly, I extended my left hand. "Yes," I said simply. The joy that bloomed across his face was worth every difficult moment we had endured. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I added one condition, but we renew our vows my way this time. Small ceremony. My dad walks me down the aisle, and Agnes gets a front row seat, even if we have to fly to Florida. Daniel laughed, the sound bright and clear in the winter air. "Done, all of it." As we walked back to the car, Lily between us holding both our hands, I thought about the stranger on the train who had offered me his seat that day, not knowing he was setting in motion events that would transform all our lives. I thought about Agnes and her 3 simple words, about Margaret and her painful but genuine change, about my father's steadfast support and Daniel's hard-won growth. Most of all, I thought about the woman I had been and the woman I had become, the voice I had found, the strength I had discovered, the boundaries I had learned to draw and defend. That evening, after we had dropped Lily at my father's house for an overnight stay, Daniel and I returned to my apartment. On the balcony where we had spent so many evenings rebuilding our connection, he pulled me close. "Do you know what today really is?" he asked, his breath warm against my hair. "The anniversary of the subway incident," I replied. He shook his head. "It's the anniversary of you finding your voice, of me finding my courage, of us finding our way back to each other, but better this time." As the winter stars appeared overhead, I rested my head against his shoulder, the new ring catching the light as I moved. The circle complete, yet nothing like where we had begun. This time, we were entering it as equals, 2 whole people choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. "God sees everything," Agnes had said that day on the train, and now, at last, we could truly see each other.